YouTube people, once again, it's your lucky day. I don't know why you're so blessed that you get so many wonderful videos from me. So it's time to crank out another one off the top of my head, as always. I've got my reloading bench set up. And the amazing thing about it is it's not a bench. And I can explain that. I used to reload ammunition back when I lived in Miami, spit. And I had it on a bench in my garage. This is my pointing device. It's a shepherd's crook pot hanging type thing from Home Depot. I had it in my garage, this gigantic bench that weighed like 300 pounds that I put together. And I put the reloading press on it. And even though this was a really heavy bench, and you could literally, if you could find a way to put a car on top of it, it would have held it up just fine. It still really wasn't that stable. I had to add little bits of wood to it and so forth. And if you have a reloading press and it wobbles at all, it can cause cartridges to fly out. It can cause all kinds of problems. So it was a bummer. That's what I'm trying to tell you. And I got up here in this new place where I live in northern Florida. And I thought, I've really got to start working on reloading ammunition because, you know, if you don't reload your own ammunition, you're not a man. Well, I wanted to get a bench for it, and I have these nice Chinese oak top benches indoors now. I'm in my new gun room, which I probably told you about already. Well, all I had to do to get a really nice reloading chamber gun room was to get rid of my dining room furniture, which was worthless anyway. Who uses that stuff? Men, if you have something in your life that prevents you from getting a reloading station and putting it in your dining room and getting rid of all the useless china and stuff, you know, if you have something like that, like such as a wife, you might want to consider getting rid of that because it's wonderful to have this. I mean, let's see if I can. I've got, what do I got here? I got my TV up on the wall, my monitor, and I got my computer, and I got my other little bench over there, and my extremely expensive ergonomic chair that I inherited, which was vastly overpriced. And I've got, I don't know how well you can see this because the camera, of course, is not showing me anything from the back. But anyway, I got my, my shelves, which aren't really organized yet, but they're they're great. They got all my junk off the floor. Well, anyway, spectacular, just having all this stuff handy. Wonderful. So I was going to weld up some kind of bench because I didn't want to drill holes in these things. And then I thought to myself, well, why don't I make something temporary? So I went out in the yard, literally, and I found a 2x8 that was just junk that I had meant to take to the dump. And I cut two pieces out of it with a Sawzall, and then I used Tapcons, which are, cheap screws, 4 of them, to screw 2 of these pieces together. First, I cleaned it up on the bandsaw. I didn't want to, the Sawzall doesn't make such a great cut. So I cleaned it up on the bandsaw, and I screwed 4 screws into it, and then I clamped it in this thing, which is a Rockwell Jawhorse. Now, this is a weird tool. I bought it years ago for some reason that I no longer recall. And I'm not going to tell you that I recommend anybody buy a Jawhorse. They're very heavy. They're awkward to use. Once you get it set up, it's wonderful. It holds things so steady you wouldn't believe it. You can use it for sawing stuff, and you can put all sorts of weird attachments in it for welding and things. So it really is a neat device, but there's probably other ways to solve the problems that it solves for the most part. Anyway, I already had it. So I put this thing together and I drilled a couple of holes in the top 2x8, and I had a couple of surplus mismatched 1/2-inch bolts. So I screwed them into this thing, through it, and stuck my press on it. And I'm going to tell you something. This thing is super rock steady, and it doesn't mar the floor. It has rubber pads or some kind of synthetic pads on the bottom of it. It doesn't move at all when you, barely at all, when you operate the press. And it doesn't take up all that much room. And when I feel like moving this thing, all I got to do is pop this thing out of here and remove the press from this piece of wood. And then I could just put the press in the box and put this piece of wood, I guess, on top of the box. And I'm all set. And I can just wheel the Jawhorse into a corner, fold it up, or do whatever I want with it. So this is tremendous. This is really tremendous. This is genius. I don't know how I came up with it. I'm so pleased with myself. I feel so smug. I fired it up today, and I managed to crank out 77 rounds of 10 millimeter, and that's all the old brass I had for 10 millimeters. So now I've got to break into the new brass, which breaks my heart. This top here, you can use it. It's so steady. You can use it for a bullet puller. I took my bullet puller and I was beating out defective rounds on this thing, and it was no problem at all. It was extremely stable. And what I'm thinking about doing is I'm going to screw a tray to this thing, some kind of a tray. I was thinking, well, I'll put plywood on it, and then I'll put molding around the plywood to keep stuff from falling off. And I thought, well, why do that? I can go to a restaurant supply place and spend $10 on an aluminum baking sheet and screw that to this, or I can find a plastic tray someplace. So you can't tell now, but when I was actually making the ammunition, I had my bullets up here, and I also had my cases up here. And they didn't wobble around. They didn't try to walk off. It was just spectacular. So this has been a fantastic, wonderful experience. And another thing is you can put a garbage can down here under your tube. I need to replace this tube because it doesn't like to pass primers anymore. But anyway, you can get yourself a garbage can and stick it down here and not worry about emptying your tube. So phenomenal, wonderful, magnificent thing. So happy about this. I hope this will be useful to you, and you should also know, if you decide you want to do this, if you don't have a Jawhorse, again, I'm not saying I recommend one. I mean, it's a neat tool if you have the uses for it. But if you do have one, or if you really want one, you can go to Harbor Freight and get basically the same thing. And this thing, I believe, is 180 bucks. I think the Jawhorse is 180 bucks now, usually on Amazon. You can get the Harbor Freight version, which is supposedly identical, for 130. And right now, if you root around online, you can find a coupon for 99 bucks. So that's unbeatable. I've seen the things that they sell online, the dedicated reload and press stands, and they just don't look too good to me. I mean, to me, they look like ironing boards. I find it hard to believe that they're all that steady. This thing is steady as a rock, and you can fold it up and get it out of the way when you don't like it, when you don't want it around. So, really thrilled. I hope this turns out to be useful to you, and if not, well, I didn't waste too much of your time.